This budget does fulfill the Liberal government's commitment to the NDP to implement national dental care, at least the next step. It will start to be rolled out in phases this year and will affect as many as 9 million uninsured Canadians. The cost will be $13 billion over 5 years, and I believe about $4.4 billion a year after that. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is here now to talk about that and the rest of the spending plan. So your big request, Mr. Singh, was there in the next step on dental. Are you satisfied that they're going to fully deliver on the condition of the confidence and supply agreement?
So for this year, we can say very clearly that in this budget, we're saving Canadians $1,700, $1,200 per year with the expansion of the dental care program, up to $500 with the GST rebate being doubled, which is now being called the grocery rebate. We forced the government to deliver this. That's real concrete support for people. It's going to save money for families, and we're proud that we're able to do that. We also were able to bring in, for the first time, guarantees with investments to fight the climate crisis tied to good wages. That's never happened before, and we're proud of that.
Okay, one thing that has gone, though, is a $500 rental top-up. And I was told by officials inside the lockup, one of the challenges is that people just weren't signing up for it. People weren't able to take advantage of it, so it was undersubscribed. Are you satisfied with that explanation for getting rid of the $500 to help people with rent?
We understand that that was a concern that was raised, and we focused in on concrete measures that would provide that support to people. We know with the GST rebate that works, that goes directly to people. I can remember when I was struggling with my brother, we were living together and I was caring for him. He was in high school and I was in university, getting money back in my pocket to help me with groceries when I was worried about helping my kid brother when I was going to university would have made the world to me. And so that's something that's concrete, and we're proud that we're able to make that happen.
That's concrete. The economic projections, the revenue projections, not at all concrete. There's a lot of volatility and a lot of uncertainty in those. How concerned are you that the economic and fiscal track of this country could deteriorate quite significantly based on what we read in the budget today?
Well, there is a lot of volatility globally that's going to have impacts on Canada, and we have to be very aware of that. And so the idea of us having the responsibility of being prudent with our spending is something I agree with. And there's different priorities that I would have than the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister have shown. I would not continue with fossil fuel subsidies where billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars go towards profitable oil and gas companies. I would not allow tax loopholes to continue, which mean we are losing billions of dollars of revenue. And instead, I would use our revenue towards other priorities, like improving our EI in the face of a recession and making sure we're building more homes that people can afford.
Right, but a lot of that is redistribution. What would you do for growth? I mean, so much of the subsidies, as you call them, for fossil fuels and profitable energy companies is to help with the transition or to reduce their pollution footprint, and that would create good-paying union jobs if they live up to the conditions of this. What would you change in that particular attempt at an industrial growth policy here?
Well, with the growth, I would focus on new energy and new technology. So clean energy, electrification, the electric vehicle program I support, but I wouldn't be giving money to oil and gas sectors that have already made record profits, and instead I would say they should, by regulation, have to invest in clean energy or clean technology. They, by regulation, should have to clean up the oil wells that they've abandoned. That's not something we should be paying them to do. That's something they should do, particularly now when they've just received the highest profits they've ever enjoyed in years.
Right, but I mean, there's the principled argument, I guess, that you're making from your point of view, but then there's the practical argument that you have these emitters, and they argue they spend a lot of those profits on exploration and expansion and new development, and if you wanted to make this change, that it's going to take a little bit of help. So, I mean, why separate an oil company from another company if they are transitioning towards clean energy and clean future just because you don't like the profit margins?
Well, fiscal responsibility means we've got to ask certain people to be responsible. And when we've got a sector that's made record profits, I think it's reasonable and responsible, given the fiscal volatility that we're faced with, to say, well, you've just made more profits than you've ever made in 3 decades. We're going to require you to take certain steps to clean up your act. Other areas that we don't have a lot of development where we need to incentivize more growth, we're going to put money up and invest in that. I think that's the right way to approach it.
What about the government's fiscal track here? The deficits are way up, even from in November. We're looking at annual debt payments by 2027, 2028 are going to double from just a couple of years ago. $50 billion a year. Between now and then, $235 billion just in interest. I mean, that's $40 billion more than the health deal. I mean, there's no plan right now to get to a zero deficit, to get to a balanced budget. I mean, should they clean up their act in terms of fiscal responsibility? Your confidence and supply partner, are they doing a good enough job on the fiscal side?
Well, there's areas that I said they've not been doing enough. I think that there's massive loopholes that still exist, and many credible groups have come out and said there's billions of dollars of lost revenue. We could close up those tax loopholes, and that would give us more revenue. I think that's something we should be doing. We can't afford not to do. I think there's better use of our funds. I think where we do need to be investing is in having an EI system that works for workers, given that a recession is looming. Many economists have said what we need to do is soften the landing, and to do that we need a program in place that actually helps workers if there's job losses.
This budget makes clear, and as Chrystia Freeland pointed out, the budget is based on a forecast from the private sector. It's not the department coming up with these numbers, but it's based on a forecast that predates the challenges in the banks with Silicon Valley Bank, with Credit Suisse in Europe, which has created a lot of uncertainty and instability out there. It says in pretty stark language that the chances of a soft landing are much smaller than they were, certainly in November when they did the fall economic statement. How worried are you about a recession right now, that the country is headed towards a hard landing, and these numbers, as bad as they've gotten since November, could get even worse by next November?
Oh, I'm deeply worried, but I'm particularly worried that while we know that's something that's going to happen, I think there's no question about the presence or the fact that a recession is going to happen. There's some debate about how hard or soft it will be, but there will be a recession. We are not prepared, and many economists have said we're not prepared if we don't have a proper EI system that covers all Canadian workers. And this Liberal government's been promising to improve EI for years now and has not done that. That's irresponsible. I think we need to do that to protect ourselves. Also, the idea that when times are tough, I don't believe in cutting the help that people need. People need supports to get through these difficult times. I believe we need to look at who's the one that's bearing the burden of all this. While people can't afford their groceries, grocery CEOs are enjoying the biggest profits they've ever enjoyed ever. That's a problem to me when workers are asked to sacrifice, but the wealthy CEOs and the wealthiest corporations are actually enjoying record profits. There is an imbalance there that makes people frustrated and angry, and we need to respond to that.
Okay, Jagmeet Singh, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That was NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is responding to the budget. Let's go to his comments that started just moments ago.
Budget by the costly coalition of the NDP and Liberals is a full frontal attack on the paychecks of hardworking Canadians. It equals $4,200 per family in new government spending. That's more inflation, more taxes, and more costs for everyday people. There's no common sense. We asked for three things. The government should have brought home lower prices by eliminating inflationary deficits and carbon taxes, brought home powerful paychecks with lower taxes that reward hard work, and brought homes people could afford by getting rid of the government gatekeepers to speed up and lower the cost of building permits. Those are the three demands we put forward, and those three demands have not been met. This is an attack on the hardworking people of this country, and that is why Conservatives will be voting no. Instead, we will vote to bring home powerful paychecks, bring home lower costs, and bring homes that people can afford. It's common sense. Let's bring it home.
A big chunk of the money goes toward, obviously, dental coverage. This is not something that the government ran on as a mandate. What do you make of this, that a huge amount of taxpayers' money is going toward this initiative when they didn't run on this issue?
Well, they didn't run on any of this. They've once again broken their promises, and they've poured fuel on the inflationary fire. Low-income, working-class people will suffer the most as a result of this costly inflationary Liberal deficit. And Conservatives will fight once again to bring home lower prices by eliminating the inflationary carbon tax and deficits, bring home powerful paychecks by lowering taxes to reward hard work, and bring homes people can afford by getting the gatekeepers out of the way to build millions of new residents affordable for our workers.
Sur la taxe sur le carbone, on sait que le gouvernement fédéral veut maintenant lier les mains des prochains gouvernements pour
connected the hands of future governments in this regard. That's impossible. Impossible. Justin Trudeau wants to force taxpayers to pay billions of dollars to big businesses, to big corporations, multinational corporations. If a future government reduces the cost of gas, that is impossible. A Poilievre government will reduce the cost of gas and heating, and similar items, and we will never pay big corporations who are friends of Justin Trudeau.
So Justin, here, just to
compensate companies.
Let's just follow how out of touch Justin Trudeau is. Justin Trudeau believes Canadian taxpayers should make multi-billion-dollar payments to powerful multinational corporations if ever a future government should reduce taxes on gas and home heating. That's what he believes. He believes the little old lady who can't heat her home and pay for her food should have to pay higher taxes to fund a multinational corporation if in any event, in any future scenario, we should lower taxes on energy. That is an outrageous attack on our working class. Another example of Justin Trudeau taking from the have-nots to give to the have-yachts.
How much of this do you think is related to the NDP deal that they have, and what do you think of the NDP saying, we're supporting this because we've gotten what we need out of it?
We have an NDP government that is running massive inflationary deficits, bankrupting households, keeping young people living in their parents' basements, forcing seniors to choose between heating and eating. There is literally only one party that is championing the hardworking people who contribute and make this country work. We, as Conservatives, will fight for a Canada that works for the people who work. It's common sense. We need to bring it home.
L'équilibre budgétaire devrait se faire quand et de quelle manière?
Pardon?
Le retour à l'équilibre budgétaire
No, the
devrait se faire
return
quand et
to
de
a
quelle manière?
balanced budget should happen when and how.
En arrêtant d'ajouter
Well, first of all, by
davantage de
not
dettes.
adding more
Aujourd'hui,
debt.
le gouvernement a
Today, the
annoncé
federal
notre
government announced
67
another
milliards de dollars
$67 billion
de dépenses
in spending,
supplémentaires
additional
qu'on n'avait
spending
pas auparavant.
that did
Des
not
mesures
exist before,
coûteuses.
costly
Il faut
measures.
arrêter d'ajouter.
So we have to stop
Il faut mettre un
adding
cap, il faut
to
limiter
the
les
spending.
dépenses avec une
We
loi
need to
qui
limit
oblige le
spending
gouvernement de
with
trouver $1
legislation
d'économie
that
pour
forces
chaque
the government to
dollar
find
de
$1
nouveaux
in spending
dépenses.
for
Faut
every
éliminer le
dollar in new
gaspillage,
spending.
arrêter de
Avoid
donner
wasting money
nos sommes aux
and
consultants
not give so
et
much money
d'éliminer
to
le gaspillage
consultants
dans le gouvernement.
and
C'est comme ça
eliminate
qu'un
waste in
gouvernement
government.
Poilievre va
That's how
éliminer
a
les déficits
Poilievre government
inflationnistes
will
et
get rid of these
laisser
inflationary
davantage dans les poches
deficits
des
and
Canadiens
leave more money
pour
in
que
the pockets
le
of
travail
Canadians
redevienne
so
payant
that
encore.
work still is worth it.
Measures in the budget to try and deal with this. More money for the RCMP to investigate and liaise with diaspora communities, and the creation of a new counter-foreign interference office. Is that enough in your eyes? Would you have liked to see more? And specifically, what more would you have liked to see in the budget on that?
Well, it's not just more money. We need a prime minister who protects our democracy. This prime minister was aware that the dictatorship in Beijing was interfering in multiple elections to help him get elected, and he did exactly nothing. What we need is a prime minister who will bring home control of our democracy to this country. This country should control its own democracy, not Davos, not Beijing. No one outside of the walls of our country should determine what happens in our land, and I will stand up for our democracy.
In this budget that you...
Okay, that was Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre giving his reaction to the budget. The Conservatives are not a fan of the Liberal spending plan, as he has referred repeatedly to inflationary Liberal deficits, making the point that there are billions of dollars of increased deficits in the fiscal plan rolled out by Chrystia Freeland today, and saying that a Conservative government under his leadership would put an end to that practice by bringing in legislation and fiscal rules that for every dollar of new spending, a government would have to find $1 in savings or $1 in cuts. We got the Bloc Québécois here. They say they're not satisfied with the federal budget. Jean-Denis Garon is the party's revenue critic. Sir, thank you so much for...
Hi, good evening.
You're not going to support the budget. You don't like this budget. What's your number one frustration with it?
Well, the problem is not so much about what there is in the budget. It's about what there isn't in the budget. We had set up 5 conditions for supporting it, and the main one was the health transfers. So there's a little bit of health transfers, but they're insufficient. There's a bit more than $4 billion new health transfers in there. We asked for $28 billion yearly, and that was a request of provinces. So it's not in there, so we can't support it. The second thing is that we wanted to put an end to this dual classes of seniors that the government created a few years ago. We wanted the same benefits, old age benefits for the 65-74 than for the 75 plus, and it's not in there. We wanted the in-depth reform of the unemployment insurance scheme, and it's not in there. And for the next couple of years, the workers, the unemployed are gonna pay for this hole that's been created during the pandemics. And we think that the government should support directly from its main revenues, support that hole because and fill it because. What is it? It is a pandemic expense, a special expense, and there's a recession looming. So really, there's so many things missing in there. I think it's a huge missed opportunity for Quebec, for the seniors, and for the health systems of the 10 provinces and the 3 territories.
The health transfers, EI, and harmonizing the OAS and GIC benefits for seniors, those are big ticket items.
Yeah.
They would cost a lot of money. Where they've put the bulk of the new spending in this is in this industrial policy of tax credits to spur the clean transition. Quebec with lithium and Hydro-Quebec is now eligible for some of these tax credits if they work on new generation. Are you satisfied with where they're going on that front?
Well, it's a good news to see that, you know, there's this 15% tax credit on those new investments in clean energy. So now you have to know that there are a lot of effort has already been done in Quebec for clean energy. Hydro-Quebec could qualify, but there's a bunch of conditions that are going to be, we're going to get it's going to be clearer to us what those conditions are, but we see in the budget that lowering the price of electricity would be one of the criteria, and the electricity in Quebec, as you might know, is the cheapest in North America. So it looks like that might become a program to subsidize nuclear energy in Ontario. So we'll see with time if Quebec gets its fair share, but it's not obvious that is going to be the case.
Right, well, there could be other, I mean, Premier Legault is meeting with Premier Fury about maybe future development renewal of Churchill Falls in Labrador, so that could be potential hydro and even transmission into Atlantic Canada to replace coal. I mean, it could be all part of this. But when you've come here with a list of expensive items, much like Jagmeet Singh did. The fiscal track is not the sort of fiscal track that suggests there's a lot of space for more expensive items.
I disagree with that.
Really? Well, you're not worried about the increase in deficits and the doubling of debt servicing?
I do agree with it, but you have to look. You have to look in the long term, in the long run. So the argument of the federal, the federal government puts exactly the kind of graphs that it wants in the budget and hides other ones, right? I'm an economist and I can see through that. I know that quite well. So their argument is that at the moment you have budget surpluses in some provinces, and the federal government has a deficit. But when you look at the deficit in proportion of the GDP, and the Parliamentary Budget Office has said it, now the budget says it as well, the federal government expects to have eliminated its whole debt by 2055. By 2055.
It's debt.
Yeah,
right.
As a proportion of the GDP. Right. And then the debt of the provinces as a proportion of GDP is going to continue to increase. So there's room, there's about $40 billion of room for making sure that people are going to get the health care that they need in the next couple of years, because the health care problem is a long-term problem. It takes 5, 10, 15 years to implement a full reform. And if we don't start right now, we're creating problems for the future, for 10, 15 years from now. And at that moment, the debt in proportion of the GDP of the federal government would have declined, and the debt of the provinces will be on the rise.
It sounds like fiscal imbalance is coming back. This sounds like
It's not coming back. It's not coming back. It was never gone. Right. It was never done.
Well, listen, Jean-Denis Garon, it was really nice to meet you. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Jean-Denis Garon, the Bloc Québécois revenue critic.